you're taking in these injured animals, most of which are injured or sick because of people, how we're impacting the environment, and you're making them better and getting to send them back out. It wasn't zookeeper work where, you're seeing the same animals and you're keeping them all the time. You're actually putting them back out where they belong to continue, contributing to their population and to their ecosystem in the niche that they fill.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon Tree Podcast, the show where we talk to great communicators about how they do what they do. I'm your host, Chris Hobson, and today we're speaking with Jen Riley and Jessica Andersen of the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center. Well, in the interest of full disclosure, and we were talking a little bit before we got on here, I should tell the audience that we were actually initially connected with you all when we noticed a mourning dove in our backyard had a broken wing. It looked like a broken wing, and we can go into that in a little bit of what actually happened there. A local wildlife rescue group recommended that we actually reach out to you, and you all have been great caring for the dove ever since. So right off the top, I want to say a huge thank you to you all.
You're welcome. That's what we're here for.
Put our mind at ease. Well, let me start by asking Jen, if I can, to give the viewers some background on what the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center is and the great work you and your team do there.
Absolutely, yeah. So Blue Ridge Wildlife Center works to protect native wildlife in Virginia by integrating veterinary medicine, wildlife rehabilitation, professional training, research, and public education. So we have kind of these multifaceted approaches to help protect wildlife in our area. We see about 4,000 patients a year at our hospital, and the whole thing kind of goes through this hospital. So we have the veterinary team here doing all of those procedures. We have rehabilitators who are caring for those animals up until release. We also have educators who go out and do public programs, and we train dozens of students every year, veterinary students, vet tech students, rehab interns, and then we have year-long fellowships as well. So we're kind of doing a whole range of things to help protect native wildlife.
All year round. That's excellent. And actually, when the mourning dove came to us, well, I say it came to us, but it landed in our backyard. That was actually during the horrible ice storms that we've had this year. So it's a very hardy dove. So and we were very gratified that you were open at the time. So thank you again. Jessica is a rehabilitation director. I was wondering if you could talk about the kind of the animals you typically treat and maybe share some stories about how they made their way to you.
Yeah, so we take in all native Virginia wildlife, from mice all the way up to bald eagles, and everything in between. And generally speaking, if you look at like our most common species every year, our number one is always cottontails. Our number two, actually, surprisingly, this past year was box turtles, at about 351 box turtles in 1 year, which is crazy. But then normally number three is somewhere tied with possums and eastern gray squirrels, depending on how the seasons go. And those are sort of our top four, like, most common animals we see. So it's a lot of common backyard animals, people might think. So bunnies, squirrels, possums, songbirds, raptors, some medium mammals like raccoons and foxes. But really anything you're going to find naturally in Virginia, we're happy to take in and take care of, if that's something that needs help. Generally speaking, we're seeing these animals come in almost 100% due to human reasons. So whether that's domestic cat attacks, whether that's birds hitting windows, cars hitting animals, for some of our reptiles, we're getting weed whacker collisions, we're getting mower incidents. Sometimes they're really indirect. So like a snake getting stuck in mesh netting, or a great horned owl getting stuck on a barbed wire fence. But so all of these things are really caused by human interactions, or by the ways that humans have, adjusted the landscape around us.
Interesting. Yeah, I was a couple of episodes. Well, actually, the episode that we did 2 times ago was with a gentleman who's a naturalist out in Maryland, and he does a range he doesn't do a lot of rehab. He does more just kind of a lot of education and doing a lot of data gathering, just to kind of track the effects of global warming and I should say climate change and things like that. One big thing he was talking about when it came to birds, and you just touched on it, Jessica, there was collisions with windows. And so people can go back and watch that episode if they're interested. There's a range of things you can do to prevent that. And one thing he said is just put stickers up in windows. So we took that to heart, and we've been putting up like we just have these like crow stickers, I think from Halloween, and we've been putting neighbors might not be, to think it's kind of odd, but we put a couple here and there because really that actually breaks up the reflective effect. So thank you for kind of having that through line on from one of our last episodes. Well, people tend to find their careers in different ways, and I'm wondering if maybe Jen, if you could start, please tell us what initially inspired and influenced you between childhood and maybe say college to eventually choose this particular career path. I want to hear from both of you.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely was one of those kids who wanted to be a veterinarian as a little girl. And, at the time I was really interested in my pets, mostly at home. But then I was really inspired by the film Jurassic Park in the early 90s. And I decided I wanted to be a dinosaur vet, which luckily is what I get to do now. Birds are the only extant dinosaurs. So I feel like I succeeded in my childhood dream fairly well. And of course, as I got older and I went through school, I wanted to do more international work. I wanted to work with primates a lot when I was in college. And when I got into vet school, my first job after vet school actually was an internship in Belize, where I did wildlife medicine there because I wanted to work with primates largely. And my intern mate at the time was really into birds, so she kind of got me back into that side of things. And I came out of that wanting to do wildlife medicine in the US. So that was my trajectory from Jurassic Park to
your flight path to your career, right?
Exactly.
So, Jessica, well, how about you?
I definitely was a kid who was more interested in hanging out with animals than I was people. I was a very shy child. I grew up in the woods, actually in Baltimore County near the Patapsco State Park in Maryland. So I spent a lot of time in the woods. I spent a lot of time riding horses and running around in the woods by myself with our dogs. And there was a time where I was like, do I want to be a vet? But by the time I got through like high school and was looking at colleges, I was like, no, that's a lot of responsibility. That is somebody's, part of their family in your hands that you're taking care of, right? And then I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was going to college. I was like, I want to do something maybe with photography or science. And it really wasn't until my senior year of college that I was like, crap, I'm about to graduate. What am I doing with my life now? And I knew I still wanted to work with animals. And I just started looking for internships, and I found a bunch of, zookeeping internships. There was a lot of sanctuary work. But then there was this marine mammal care rehab internship in Southern California that I was like, you know what? I'm just applying to a whole bunch of things. And I got accepted there, and I got accepted to a big cat sanctuary. And I said, I'm going to go work with marine mammals. That sounds really cool. And that was like my first eye-opening experience. I didn't even know rehab was a thing. But it was the idea of like you're taking in these injured animals, most of which are injured or sick because of people, how we're impacting the environment, and you're making them better and getting to send them back out. It wasn't zookeeper work where, you're seeing the same animals and you're keeping them all the time. You're actually putting them back out where they belong to continue contributing to their population and to their ecosystem in the niche that they fill. So that was really the start of that. I did that for a couple of months. I stayed in LA for a little bit, and then I got a year-long apprenticeship in Texas at another rehab facility. And then in 2015, I think I got this job as a rehab associate, and I have been here ever since.
Wow. And that's interesting. You bring up an interesting point, Jessica. You both have this, inherent love of animals. Is it ever hard? Do you ever get animals in and then it's kind of hard to release them back? Or is there a part of you that sees the bigger picture and knows it's better probably for the animal to be gone than your best friend?
Yeah. I don't think, at least for me, I mean, that is the goal of what we do. And I think especially like when you're a little kid, you do have that kind of attitude of, I want to take care of things. I want them to be my friend. I think by the time you get to this stage in your career, we're here because we want to see wildlife in the wild. Certainly we do a lot of talking about One Health here. So the idea that, human, animal, domestic animal, wildlife, and environmental health are all interconnected. And a lot of our research focuses on that. So to me, the bigger picture here is the research side of things and how we're protecting planetary health. So to us, getting an animal back out in the wild, that's the success story. That's what we're wanting to see. We have no desire for them to be here any longer than they need to be.
Yeah. I only smile because I used to have this thing of like, I don't understand how people can have a hard time releasing things, right? Like, get them gone. That's where they belong. Like, this is the whole point.
Right.
And then we had 2 baby raccoons that we raised, and their story was just very cute and heartbreaking. But they came together, and 2 raccoons is like the perfect number of raccoons. And you just watch them go from like these very scared or like small, timid things to these very competent, large adult animals outside. And I didn't even get to go to the release. Jen did the release, and I was like,
and I don't like doing releases.
and she doesn't even really like raccoons. And I was like,
maybe that was better.
To get a video of them getting released, and the pictures and the videos of them, I was just like, okay,
I did good.
Like, it was emotional, but in a good way to see them release. It's like, when I don't have kids, so I don't know how human parents are. But like,
right.
You see your kids and you're like, I've given them all the tools. I've taught them right. They're ready to go. And I'm letting them out into the world to do what they're supposed to do. And like, I hope they get it right. I hope the world treats them okay back. And it was just like, okay, you're going to do great.
I get more like that with the adult animals. I think more so for me. I'm like, these babies that we raise, whatever.
Yeah.
But the adults that I'm like, you had this massive injury. I know you're a competent adult. I know you've got this. And you had one setback from a human caused issue. We've now repaired that fracture, that wound, whatever. Yeah. Those are the ones that I'm like, you go out and do your thing. You got this.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah.
Well, and like, you don't want to be like that other human who holds them back.
Exactly. We don't want to hold them back.
Because you're already here because of a human.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
That's interesting. Do you got, and that's another interesting question. Do you all collect data in any way? I mentioned the naturalist we talked to out in Calvert County, Maryland, does a lot of data collecting. Do you do that sort of thing? And if so, do you share it, or what's the end goal of collecting it? If you do?
So we use it's a website or a database called the Wildlife Medical Rehabilitation Database, and a couple thousand wildlife centers use this platform to keep our medical records, basically. So even though they are wild patients, they're not privately owned animals. Legally, they still require a medical record for every patient that comes into care. So all of that information gives us their found location, the reason they came in, all of the stats about that individual species, their success, were they released, did they die, were they euthanized, kind of all of those breakdowns of what happened. Plus, we're involved in about a dozen research projects at any given time. So we're constantly collecting data on diseases that they have. And that's how we find out kind of what diseases are common in our area. Like, we use that data to figure out a lot of these studies, and what we do with that. So we can also share those records between other people. If other places are doing research and they don't necessarily need fresh samples, or doing like a retrospective study and looking back at data that we have, it's really helpful. And luckily there are thousands of centers doing that, so that we can all kind of compile our data. There's hundreds of thousands of animals in wildlife rehab across the US every year. So there's a huge amount of information available from that.
Yeah, we make a lot of the stuff that we find, we post that on our social media a lot, especially if it's something significant. Like, we were the first facility to test for a red fox that had HPAI in the entire state of Virginia. So that was really cool. Or
we're often the first for everything because we're the ones testing it. So it's like, everybody's like, oh, all these things are in Clark County. It's like, we're just the ones looking for it. That's the problem. So yeah, we had the first Asian longhorn tick. We had a echinococcus in Clark County first. So there's lots of different kind of things that we're looking at that are only being found because we're looking at these things in wildlife.
Well, that's, and that, if anyone out there who's trying to stay safe, stay healthy, check out the social media handles, which we will share in the show notes once this is posted. So,
and we do run the social media, so just got to live up photography as well, because we take lots of pictures, and we do manage all of our social media accounts here.
Excellent. Very good. Well, this is, and I keep bringing it back to this dove that we found in our backyard. But so this is a self-serving question, but, in the specific case of this mourning dove we were talking about, when we send it to you, can you give the audience kind of a picture of the spectrum of care? So what happens maybe when I'm sure it's different for a lot of different animals, but for this dove in particular, let's just say, when it comes in, if you have any knowledge of kind of how the process started, what's the intake like, kind of what is that spectrum of care, and then what on the other end, if everything is successful and it works out the way it should, what's the end point of that?
Sure. Yeah. So the start to finish process, like you experienced, you call the center, hopefully you talk to our front desk, and hopefully you had a good experience with them. They're amazing. So they kind of collect all the data from the finders. We figure out where that dove is from, any history that's relevant. and they pass that along to the vet staff. So as soon as that bird gets here, they are immediately seen. Sometimes in spring or summer, we might have 40 patients in a day. So sometimes they get triaged and they might wait a little bit. But compared to like human medicine and human hospitals, these patients are seen very, very quickly. They're treated very, very quickly. So for this dove, for instance, there was nobody else in front of him in line in that sense. So immediately came back to our veterinary team and our veterinary students that are with us at the time. So we're educating the next generation of wildlife vets at the same time. We do a full physical exam. For mourning doves, because they are really high stress and because we did palpate a fracture right away, we give them very strong pain medications, we give them some sedation, and then we kind of let them sit for half an hour while that kind of all takes effect. So that way we can take them back out, do a more thorough exam. And at that point, we realized that bird had a coracoid fracture, which is one of the shoulder bones, part of the shoulder complex, that was actually pretty severely displaced. And with coracoid fractures, because they are internal, it's not like it's kind of a separate bone that we don't have, but it kind of goes into their body cavity a little bit. And it often does fracture when they hit cars or windows. So it's a pretty common bone to fracture. So we did take x-rays of that pretty much as soon as he was a little bit sedated. And we were able to bandage that. So it's one of those fractures that doesn't get pinned or plated or anything like that, like a lot of the long bone fractures do. It's just about stopping movement at that joint. So we basically stabilize the shoulder joint with a bandage. And then every 3 to 5 days, we take that bandage off with sedation and we do physical therapy. So that whole time, the bird is on pain medications and sedatives to keep them a little more comfortable and to keep them eating. A lot of mourning doves, if they're not, on a little bit of sedation, tend to not want to eat as well. They can break feathers and things like that if they're too high stress. So we try to keep everybody calm and pain-free. That's always kind of the goal, is to limit any kind of suffering. And also just keeping that fracture stabilized helps with that too. So after, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just going to interject and ask you, did I remember somebody saying that it's like a collarbone fracture in a human? Is that?
So they actually have a clavicle as well. So they have the same bone. The coracoid goes just kind of down past that. So it's just a fourth bone that we don't have in our shoulder. Basically, they have 4 shoulder bones. So people often compare it to a clavicle or a scapula, a shoulder blade, or a collarbone, but it's technically one in between the two that we just don't have. And that's what actually allows for flight. It's part of the flight complex. So it's one of the reasons of many that we can't fly. Turtles have it too, to be fair. Everybody except the mammals have it. So yeah, after about 2 weeks, that bone is stabilized. So all of the muscles of the chest basically hold everything in place. And when you have that bandage keeping it in place, those bones can stabilize. And that mourning dove is actually outside in our pre-release caging now. So not flying great yet. This was a really badly displaced fracture. So in those cases, they don't always heal. The bone pieces don't always heal together, but it scars down enough that they're often able to fly. So at this point, we have our rehab team just assessing them every single day, seeing if this bird can fly well enough for release. And that's kind of going to be what it comes down to at the end, is, do you fly well enough to get around and do all your normal day-to-day functions? There's always the chance that doesn't happen, and then that would result in us having to euthanize that bird, and that is one of the sad realities of wildlife rehab. But we are still hopeful that will go well, and this bird will be able to fly. And once they're comfortably flying and they have good endurance flying, we will be able to return them back to their found location. For adult birds especially, we're always trying to get them back to their found location so that they know their habitat, they know where they're at. For babies, in some cases, there's different regulations about where we can release them. And oftentimes baby birds are raised together and released as a group. So they're not every patient is going back to their found location, but for the animals where that matters, so adults or animals or reptiles or amphibians where a location is really important, those guys are all going to go right back home.
And something that really stuck out there when you were talking is the kind of minimally invasive, it sounds like, approach to this particular dove. And I think you contrasted it with earlier, they're sometimes plated, I think is one of maybe the words you used, or put in pins and things. So that leads me to my next question. And maybe Jessica, I can ask you to start on this one is, can you talk about maybe an example or two of some of the more complex animal cases you've seen where minimally invasive, approach was not possible?
I mean, honestly, if we're talking about we do try to keep anything where possible minimally invasive, because obviously the more invasive it is, it's going to cause more trauma. It's going to be more stressful. It's going to normally be a longer recovery time. But as far as cases that we required a lot of pinning,
Well, our vulture right now, I could talk about.
Oh yeah. You want to talk about the black vulture? Jen does all the medical stuff. I do the daily care stuff. You can talk about something. Yeah, there's some other non-medical things I could definitely chat about, but we do have a black vulture.
Let's start with Jen.
If you want to. So we have a black vulture that just came into care a couple days ago that actually had a fractured metacarpal bone, so basically one of the hand bones, so the wingtip on a bird. Also fractures in the tarso-metatarsus, which is the lower part of the leg, so just above the foot, that kind of leg bone, and then a toe fracture as well. And because of all the instability, the toe fracture was on the opposite side of the leg fracture. So this bird was having a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty standing, even though the fractures were pretty well aligned. So in those cases, especially for heavier bodied birds like vultures, they're about 4 to 5 pounds. So this is a bird that has too much pressure on them to be able to have broken bones that they're standing on. So in those cases, we do put pins in. So in his case, we did pin the leg fracture and the wing fracture, and we just opted to splint the toe fracture because that was doing kind of okay on its own. So in cases like that, where the bird is just so big that they're not going to be able to keep that fracture stable on their own, or that bandaging alone wouldn't be enough, like trying to bandage a leg of a 4-pound bird isn't going to provide the amount of stability required to heal that fracture. So in those cases, we pin things, and pinning will always result in a better outcome because that is 100% stability. We are pinning it. We put an external fixator bar on it is what we call it. So there's basically pins that go through the bone and they show up externally. And then we have these fixator bars that keep it 100% stable. So those bones are going to heal much better than something that's just in a cast, that kind of splinting equivalent. But in the mourning dove's case, the splint was the better option. The external bandaging was the better option because it is such a deep bone that goes into the body cavity. So it's just a matter of the location of the bone and how we can most conveniently stabilize it. Mm-hmm. So that vulture will be here for a couple weeks. He doesn't need as much physical therapy as the mourning dove needs because he's not in a bandage. So all of his joints work. He's not bandaged. There's just free movement of the joints. Whereas the physical therapy that we do on birds with fractures is more about keeping their joints viable. The bones are going to heal when they're stable, but the joints have to keep moving. So that's why we change those bandages so frequently and do the physical therapy.
Mm-hmm. And there's I think I heard that there's like a pre-release area. So that do they go to is it maybe an outdoor cage area, or can you paint a picture of how that works?
Sure. So, we're in our hospital facility. So this is where inside the building is generally where all of our more critical patients are, our baby patients that can't obviously keep themselves warm enough or feed on their own before they go outside. And then once they're ready for exercising, conditioning, maybe in the case of this dove, he can fly kind of well, but we want to give him more space to start strengthening those flight muscles. So we have out into our woods area if you're looking at our building to the left, we probably have 5 acres, 5 to 10 acres out there of we're in the woods. So we have enclosures built further out where it is beyond where people are parking. Guests and the public are not allowed to go back there. It's just our staff. And generally speaking, once they're outside, we're only going out, feeding them, looking at them once a day. So that means they're only being exposed to us once a day. They're getting all their food. They're getting any medications in the food that they're eating. And this just is a lot less stressful for them because they're out in their more natural environment. They're not seeing us. They're not hearing us. In some cases, I've seen where we have birds outside, the wild birds are hanging out around the enclosures with them and kind of they're talking to each other. Wow. So it's just an area where we can start prepping them and really further assessing, depending on what their injuries were or what their debilitation was. How long is this going to take? How much more time do you need? And sometimes we even will start with smaller enclosures. We have a sort of a more for an eagle that might have some wing injuries, we're not going to put them directly into our giant flight pen, which is a circular flight cage. We don't want them starting just really hard right off the bat. We want to start them, get them out of our hospital caging. They can move around. They can start flying and moving their wings a little bit, but he can't start flying and going in circles. It's a smaller enclosure. So we'll even upgrade them in steps that way, but it's still better for them to be out there than be in here with all the smells, the sounds, the sights of people where it's really stressful.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into getting rid of those sights and sounds. We have like
Yeah.
noise makers and we cover every cage. So there's a lot of effort put into ensuring these patients don't see us, and that when they do see us, especially for medical procedures, that they are sedated, they have dissociative drugs on board, that they are not remembering what they're seeing with us, because that is the biggest risk to them when they're in care, is just the stress of being around people. So especially as finders, we always remind people how important it is just to immediately contain the animal, and then do not talk around it, do not look at it, do not do anything else once it is contained. Anything else that you do at that point is only going to be harmful, and just minimizing interaction as much as possible.
One of my follow-up questions would have been, that talking about that, bringing it back to the kind of spectrum of care. Do you collect the data, you release it, and I was wondering if, but I think you kind of answered the question, which is, do you kind of, birds is probably impossible, but with other animals, do you try to track and see how it's doing? But I guess that would kind of fly in the face of like just letting it go, right? I mean, you don't like, there's no follow-on care once it's released, I guess.
There's not for financial reasons, but we absolutely would like to do follow-up. So in some places they'll band birds. So if you ever see birds with like a metal ring on their leg, or one of the wing tags, they have a couple different varieties of them, but those are ways that the public can physically see a bird. They can report those bands. And then when that information gets sent back to the band reporting system, we can find out if our animal lived. So like certainly for things like rehab and babies, if they are thriving and surviving long term, we would love to know about that. There's just not money in the rehab world to be able to fund things like that. In general, there's very few research projects on that.
Yeah. The only real thing that we've been able to do, we had a box turtle that we released here that we took pictures of because we found her here. I have pictures of, she had one of her legs amputated and she got released here. And so now we found further box turtles here, but we can take pictures of them and see, oh, are you still here? We had a group of 4 squirrels, gray squirrels, that we ended up releasing in where I previously lived in our backyard because they were all from that county. And I said, you know what, let's hang a squirrel box up and I can then see them. We were also in the woods. So I was like, this is a great spot. But we had our own squirrels there, right? So I was curious. I was like, how am I going to be able to tell the difference between them? So before we released them, we shaved just a little like shape on their flank, one of their sides, so that when they came out later, if they were missing just a little shave spot on their side, I could say, oh, that's our squirrel. And they were overwintered squirrels. We had them all winter. We released them in spring, and I saw them for a solid 4 months after we released them, even out and about with our squirrels that are from our yard. And they stopped using that box, I think, a month after we put it up, but they were still somewhere in the area doing well. I think I saw 3 of them all together once. I never saw all 4 of them together, but I was like, you 3 all hanging out. So there's like
anecdotal stories.
Yeah, you can't really we don't want to mark them in some way that's going to make them more visible to predators. We don't want to do anything that's going to prevent them from performing natural behaviors or, just offset them from their natural counterparts in a way that will negatively affect them. So it is difficult to find ways other than like bird banding, that we can then do resighting or recapturing that way of monitoring how they're doing.
Obviously, the work that you do is so important. You're rehabilitating animals. You're doing a lot of education. You're doing the tracking, like we've been talking about. So, how if you could give us an idea, how is this? If you don't mind my asking, how the center is funded, and maybe how others can help support your work, and maybe even volunteer to support your work, if that's even possible.
Yeah. So there is no federal or state funding for wildlife rehabilitation anywhere in the U.S. It is all privately funded. So we are funded by donors. And in many cases, those are the individuals who bring animals and give a donation when they drop off animals. In a lot of cases, it is more long-term donors. We have an amazing support base of monthly donors. There's ways to donate online. You can do one-time donations. You can do monthly donations. You can do corporate sponsorships. You can do in-kind donations. We have like wish lists on Amazon and things like that. So there are literally dozens of ways that people can give to us. And that is how we do all of this. So everything that happens here is purely funded by the public and people who care about wildlife or care about One Health or care about training future professionals, whatever aspect of it that person clings on to, we are happy with. We'll take that. Because it is expensive. Medicine is expensive to do anywhere. Taking care of these animals is expensive. Feeding these animals is expensive. Providing secure caging for these animals is expensive.
Having staff.
having staff, even our interns and stuff, we house our interns. So
we pay our interns.
We pay our interns. Yeah. They have a stipend. So like, even though we're, we don't think we're wasteful in any way with that money, but we are kind of using it to the best of our ability based on the donations that we receive. So monetary donations are always greatly appreciated. In-kind donations are greatly appreciated. Becoming a monthly member is an amazing way to give us consistent support throughout the year. That's always really important too.
And you get, if you become a member, you get
benefits. Yeah,
the benefits. You get an invitation to our annual open house that we have, and it's only open to members. So people get to come into our hospital and see everything behind the scenes, which we just had a couple weeks ago, and it was a huge hit. We always sell out. It's crazy.
So you got to be a member to get that first invite. And then if you're unable to give any money, you can still support us. Not only by volunteering, which I'll have you talk about volunteering, but also just on social media. If you share our posts, like so much of our content is just educational information, that the goal is really to prevent animals from needing wildlife rehab. Like our goal is always to put ourselves out of business here. Like we don't want to be taking these animals in. There are, we're not getting paid for each patient we're treating like a small animal hospital would be. So we're not making money when we get more patients. Our goal is to always have less patients. And the best way to do that is spreading that education. So if you see a post, like it, share it, comment on it, make sure that gets good reach to other people so that they don't make the same mistakes that other people are making to get these animals into care in the first place.
Yeah. And as far as volunteering goes, we do have quite a decent volunteer base. I think we have anywhere between 2 to 5 volunteers that are here every single day. And that's always kind of changing because, volunteers are here of their own accord. They're not obligated to be here. Life changes for them. So we are always taking in new volunteer applications. So if anybody's local to Boyce or in the Northern Virginia, West Virginia area and they're interested in working with us, please put an application in through our website. I will say it is kind of an on-needed basis or as-needed basis in that I can't tell you that we have orientations every March or every June or every, September. It's whenever I need volunteers. So sometimes people will email me and be like, I put my application in 4 months ago. When are you going to call me? And I'm like, when I need you. And I'm always very grateful when I don't need to bring in more people, because that means the people who are here are staying here, that we're building on their education and knowledge base, and we have more reliable volunteers. But then as we continue to take more patients and we're continuing to expand what we're doing, we're always going to need more people to help. So I normally end up doing anywhere between 3 to 4 orientations a year, including with our interns as well. So that will be coming up in the next couple of months.
And certainly we also want to have more home rehabilitators. So home rehabilitators do a lot of raising the kind of healthy orphans, things like that don't necessarily need hospitalized care. A lot of those healthy orphans will end up in rehab, and they're not the kind of patients we want here. They don't need this type of care. They can go to home rehabbers who are also typically volunteers and paying for this out of their pocket, and many of them would appreciate your donations as well. But those kind of people often start as volunteers with us. So out of every group of volunteers that we train up, there's always 1 or 2 people that are interested in becoming a rehabber themselves. And for the most part, our volunteers are sub-permittees on a larger wildlife rehab permit. So they are here, they're learning with us. They don't do this at home. This is only an on-site at the hospital thing that they do. But if anybody is interested in becoming a rehabber, we're also always happy to kind of go through that process with people. It is a 2-year process in Virginia with sponsors and a lot of hours logged. So it is definitely, it's a big commitment, but if it's something that people are interested in, we're always happy to talk to people about that and getting that process started.
Well, that's excellent. We'll put all that information in the show notes as well, whether it's funding or volunteering and everything. We'll put people in touch with you for sure, and we'll definitely point them to your social media accounts. So I guess in keeping with that, with the educational part of that, can you talk about, I believe you work with something called wildlife ambassadors. And if you could talk about why those ambassadors are so important in educating not only children, but the wider community.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. So our ambassadors are all either patients that came to us that could not be released due to some debilitation or handicap, where they wouldn't be basically they wouldn't do well if we would release them. However, the far majority of our ambassadors are ex-pets, actually. That in Virginia, it is illegal to have wildlife as pets. So I want to say like more than half, like 75% of our ambassadors that we have on the wildlife walk were all previously kept by people and either confiscated or surrendered when they found out that legally they couldn't have them. And all of those cases are going to end up with animals that are either imprinted on people, so they don't know their own species, right? They think they are people, and all of their natural behaviors are towards people, right? We have a little kestrel named Kevin. He thinks he's people. If we were to release him, he would be very friendly towards people, but that's not good for him and avoiding predators. And that's also not good for him in terms of, doing his job being a kestrel in the wild, right? He's not identifying other kestrels and breeding with them and contributing to the population. He's coming up to me and Jen and going, look at my cute little nesting spot that I have. Come and check it out. And we're like, Kevin, we can't.
We're not interested.
Stop asking me. But so a lot of our animals are either, or, we have some mammals like our red fox Jasper, our skunk Mocha, who were all bred for some reason, because I don't know, in my opinion, I'm not sure why we're breeding striped skunks to be kept as pets.
It is legal in some states.
It is legal in some states.
It shouldn't be.
But my question is like, right, we breed things because there's a need for it. There is no need for a tame pet skunk. But anyway, they were brought into Virginia. They couldn't be released. They have no survival instincts. They, again, identify with people. They think people are friends. They just have no way of keeping themselves safe. So having these animals helps people who maybe have never seen a skunk up close, or have never seen an opossum up close, or maybe they have poor opinions about vultures because they always heard that they were dirty and gross and they eat dead things. But then they come out and they see our two vultures Wednesday and Monday, and they're like, wow, actually, they're really pretty, or they're really cute, or look at them doing this training behavior. They're really smart. And now we can have, maybe that helps develop empathy for these animals, or realize like these aren't just dumb birds, or these aren't just animals that are kind of living in our world. It's quite the opposite. And they have all of these feelings and all of these sort of social behaviors and lives that they're living that maybe we should be more cognizant of and learn how to coexist with. And it's also a really good point too, for us to talk to people about how, yes, we have ambassadors, but these are like the 0.01% of animals that are appropriate for long-term captivity. Most of the animals that we have that have a debilitation or an injury where they wouldn't survive in the wild are not appropriate for captivity. They would be very stressed. They would hurt themselves further. They have an injury that is only going to cause more pain and suffering for them if we just throw them into a cage, just because we feel bad about euthanizing them. So I think it really highlights too how very specific and very important it is to have that kind of high standard for these animals so that they have good welfare. And how, even if they're in a captive setting, welfare is the most important thing for them. So there's a lot that you could take from ambassadors, but I think we touch on a lot of things, why you shouldn't keep wildlife as pets, why you shouldn't keep animals, without knowing what you're doing or being a professional, why you shouldn't, just because you feel bad that an animal can't be released, that you should just keep every single one that you have. And that's not actually a good thing for them.
I think that's something that's a lot of people maybe don't appreciate enough, is that, there's like an instinct maybe that down deep where we want to care for an animal that we find that's maybe sick or hurt. But it sounds like from everything you're saying, the best thing for them is for them to end up at a place like your center. I mean, am I kind of hearing you right on that?
If the options are, do I keep this animal and care for it myself, or do I get it to a professional? It should always be get it to a professional. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. And I like that perspective shift that you're talking about, of like, they're not living in our world, we're living in their world essentially. And I mean, there's just, I love the fact that you all are so based on education, because I just feel like you could learn any one of these animals we've been talking about. You could spend a lifetime learning about them. I'm sure you can attest to this, and never learn everything. So that's good.
One of my favorite parts of this job is literally, I feel like I learn something new every day. And we've been here for 10, 11 years.
10 years now. So yeah, at least so.
Okay, well that's proof right there. Well, and I asked this question of all of my guests who are kind of like naturalists or in the science realm. Where's a place you'd, for your purposes with rehabilitation of animals, where's a place you'd eventually like to maybe travel and rehabilitate animals, or is there a particular animal that has never come your way that you would love to, try your hand at treating?
Yeah, so I have done it before, but I would say I would go back to Florida. My first internship, or my second internship after graduating vet school in wildlife medicine, was at the Clinic for the Rehabilitation of Wildlife in Southwest Florida. And I absolutely love pelicans. They're one of those birds that we never
Oh,
get
right.
here, and it's horrible. I would love to work with pelicans every day again. And also just the amazing wildlife they have down in Florida in general. We worked with sea turtles and working with manatees or dolphins or things like that too. Like there's so many amazing wild animals down in that area. So I would go to Florida.
You could always retire down there and
That's the
still do
plan.
some rehab.
That is the plan.
Sounds like a good plan.
My answer is probably Australia, and that's just because I have always had a desire to go to Australia. I think the fauna there is incredibly different than ours. The vast amount of marsupials, the
Except
flightless
possums.
birds, possums. Yeah, possums versus opossums.
Yeah.
And it's just such a different, I don't know, landscape, like, and all the birds. I'm very much a bird person as well, so like getting to see like all the incredible birds and wildlife down there would be amazing. But that would be that's a far destination.
Well, that's a great place to leave it, and would love to check back in with you, and hopefully down the road those dreams will be fulfilled, and you'll have more stories to talk about. So, well, thank you, Jed and Jessica, for being here today. I really appreciate it. It was very enlightening. If somebody wants to sees this and wants to learn more, like I said before, we'll put all of your social media tags, all your social media handles in the show notes. We'll include the links to your website. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Multiple methods, whatever works for you. So email is always a great option. We always say if there's an emergency, please call, because we will always prioritize phone calls coming in over emails and stuff like that. But if it's not about an animal emergency specifically, you can email us anytime. Our email address is on the website. Basically contacting us through the website has all that information about phone, email, all that kind of stuff, donations. So yeah, whatever's easier for you, phone or email. But if it's an emergency, please do call, and please leave a message. And even if you're not calling us specifically, if you're calling any rehabber, always leave a message. Most of us are feeding babies, have animals in hand. Phones are not constantly answered at every location constantly. If you don't leave a message, you won't get a call back. So please leave a message.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Too.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
Bye.